Good morning, geometry, and welcome back for another week. This week, once again, we're going to keep talking about parallel and perpendicular lines. Remember, parallel is when they run beside each other. Perpendicular is when they cross, forming 90-degree angles. However, we won't get to that until tomorrow. First, we're going to do a little review on how to write some equations, and then tomorrow we'll kind of incorporate how to use these equations and write them for parallel lines. Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about, if you look up here on my notes, so the word intercept and the word slope. Now, hopefully many of you remember the equation right here, y equals mx plus b. This is called our slope-intercept equation because it gives us both the slope and the intercept. Okay, just by looking at this equation, we can find the slope and the intercept. Okay, now the slope is represented right here by the m. Okay, the m is our slope. So if you're taking notes, go ahead, write the m is your slope. Now, the b right here, this is your intercept. Now, what we mean by intercept, that is your y-intercept. Okay, that's the point when you graph it where you start on the y-axis. Okay, now, question 1 says, write an equation of a line with a y-intercept at -3 and a slope of 2. So, if you are given both the y-intercept here and the slope, it's pretty easy. All we got to do, y equals mx plus b, we're going to plug in. Instead of the m, we are going to use the slope, which is 2. So it'll be y equals 2x, okay? And then plus b. Now in our case, b is the y-intercept. It's -3, so you can do plus minus 3, or just put -3, y equals 2x minus 3, and that would be our answer. Okay? Now, question 2. Same approach, except this time, instead of telling us what the y-intercept and the slope is, they use the letters. So it says, write an equation of line with b equals 4 and m equals 1/2. Now, even if you don't know what those mean, you can hopefully plug them in, substitute them into that equation, y equals mx plus b. But we do know what m means. M is our slope. So our answer, y equals 1/2 x plus 4. Okay, so that is how we do this first part. If we are given the slope and the y-intercept, we can just plug them into the equation y equals mx plus b and move on. Okay, now sometimes we won't be given that information. Okay, so if that's the case, hopefully you can see right here, point slope form. Now this is y minus y1 equals m times the quantity x minus x1. The x and the y that are by themselves, those will stay as x and y. However, the x1 and the y1, we will plug in a point that represents the x value of it and the y value of it. Okay, now we are going to solve using that formula. Here, example 1, it says, and then eventually we'll figure out what to do if we are given 2 points instead. Okay, so example 1 says, write the equation of a line that passes through the point 3, -1 and has a slope of -2. So once again, we are given the slope. So the slope intercept, we need the slope and the intercept. We don't know what the intercept is. However, we have the slope and a point. So point slope. If you look at our problem right here, point slope, point, and slope, we are given both of those. So this is the time to use that equation. Okay, so I'll scroll down a little so we have a little more space. Okay, and now, once again, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. That's what we're going to start with. So the first thing we need to establish, 3 and -1. Which one is x and which one is y? Okay, and hopefully you guys know in an ordered pair the x comes first. So 3 in our case is our x1. Okay, that's the point, and then that -1 is our y1. Okay, so the point x1, y1 is 3, -1. And our slope is -2. Hopefully you remember slope we represent with m. Okay, so now, right here we're going to use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So y minus, instead of a y1, we're going to put this -1 there. equals, and then go ahead and we'll go ahead and plug in. So go ahead and we'll plug in this m value for m, so -2, and parentheses x minus, and for x1 we're going to put the 3 in. Okay. Now all we have to do to finish this is we need to simplify it. We need to solve it so that it looks much like our problem did earlier. We want our final answer to be similar to this in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Okay, so we have our equation set up. All we need to do now is simplify it. So right here, I know it's hard to tell. Let me fix that y there. Is that a better y? I don't know. But y, then it says minus minus. We know if we subtract a negative, those cancel, and it's kind of the same as y plus 1. Okay. Now that only happened because we were using a -1 here for y1. If you look at the equation, it's y minus y1. So since y1 was negative, minus a negative becomes positive. Okay, so now we have to distribute this -2 in. -2 times x will be -2x. -2 times -3, that's going to be a +6. We're almost done. The final step to get the y isolated, we have to subtract 1 from both sides, subtract 1, and we're left with y equals -2x plus 5. Okay? Now, let's scroll down and try. This one's a little more difficult because, as you can see, it says write an equation of line passing through the points 2, 0, and 4, 3. They give us 2 points, okay? But we don't know what the slope is. However, right here, if you're not given the slope, solve for the slope using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Several of you have probably seen this before. So let's go ahead and I'll write that formula over here. So once again, our slope equals y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. It's going to be an important formula for us to remember. Okay, so let's start by finding the slope. It doesn't matter to me which of these points is 1 and which is 2. However, we have to be consistent. So if I use 2 here as x1, then that means that 0 has to be y1. The 1's have to be together. Okay, and likewise, if those are x1 and y1, that means this would be x2 and y2. So now let's go ahead and solve. We'll substitute those in to find what the slope is. So y2 minus y1, we're going to take 3 minus 0. Okay, all on top of x2 minus x1, which would be 4 minus 2. So 3 minus 0 is 3, 4 minus 2 is 2. We get a slope. The m is 3 over 2. Okay. Now at this point, let's go ahead and we're going to use that same formula. So the one we used before, if you don't remember, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, at this point we have found what the slope is. Now all we have to do is figure out what point we want to use. So 2, 0 or 4, 3. I don't care which one you plug in. It could work with either of those points. However, I think it's easier anytime there's a 0 like here on this first point. That's a good one to use. So let's use that 0 because it will kind of cancel itself. It'll take care of itself and make it easier for us to solve. So take a look now. Let me scroll down just a tiny bit. So let's go ahead and plug into this formula up here. So we're going to do y minus, now we go y1, which is 0, and that's going to equal, now right here, we're at the slope. So our slope is 3 over 2. Hopefully you were following along as we found that. So 3 over 2, then parentheses, x minus what x1 is, which in our case is 2. Okay, so now y minus 0, that's going to cancel out. That's why it was a good idea to use that 0, and we're left simply with y equals. Okay, y equals. Now we're going to have to distribute this 3 halves in. So 3 halves times x, just 3 over 2x. Now, 3/2 times -2. If you're having trouble with that, over here to the right, I'll solve it. 3/2 times -2. -2, if we write it as a fraction, is technically over 1. So now let's multiply 3 times -2, -6 on top. 2 times 1 is 2 on the bottom. That's going to reduce. -6/2 reduces and gives us -3 as our answer. So y equals 3/2 x minus 3. Okay, so at this point, we are done. We have solved it. Okay, so remember, if you were given 2 points, you first have to find the slope. Okay, now we're going to practice some of these. We'll keep practicing. I know you're not an expert yet, but give it a try on today's assignment. Okay, it's not very long, only a few questions. Please give it a try and let me know if you have questions or need any help. Thanks.